should you get paid?
Yes.
All of us, we are training to become freelance writers to a degree and copywriters, and we're learning a lot about how to print and how to actually provide not just news stories, but content that can go on blogs, internet websites. But ultimately, the question you should ask yourself: should you get paid for it? Well, the answer, of course, is yes, 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 and well, yes. But is this always the case? Not necessarily, because again, the internet, people don't like to pay for stuff on the internet. I don't know if you know this. So, same goes with writing, is that there's not very many, there's some companies that, of course, they have a reputation, they pay their writers, a reasonable amount. Other people, they pay their writers, but they don't necessarily pay them, a respectable wage. But we'll talk about that in the presentation. So, of course, blogs, raise your hand if anybody here has a blog or is written on the internet anytime. Okay, quite a few people actually. It's always good to see. Blogging, what do you find enjoyable about blogging, David? What do you find enjoyable about it?
It's more in like the YouTube sense, so like I'll like watch a video and like the comments I see it as like more of a blog.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go in there and I'll be like, oh, these are the people's comments on what the video was about, and then I'll give my own like little spiel about what I thought.
Yeah, and you never once thought, I'm going to do this for money, fame, fortune?
No, it's more for just like a personal thing.
Okay, that's a really important point, especially as we go into this. So this is a little bit of my web history. So I started, of course, as any hobbyist for miniature games. I started off with Games Workshop hobby forums, which no longer exist. Then Facebook was invented, so you go onto Facebook. I wrote a blog, and this is pretty hilarious. So when I was working a cashier job during my lunch breaks, I actually would use my old BlackBerry phone, and I would actually write out the whole blog post, like during lunch, and on my 15-minute breaks. And I would actually email that to my email at home, grab it, edit it, put it on the website, good to go. I started a blog spot so I could keep track of my work, because I realized I was starting to write a lot of articles that, maybe I should keep track of that. Then I had a website, because, I want something that's actually mine, not another company's. And then, of course, it turned into blog posts, turned into podcasts, because it's easier to talk about stuff than it is to write, in my opinion. But I eventually moved on and I promoted it on Facebook and Twitter. We have a pretty big following now. We tend to get about 2,000 views, downloads a month, which is okay, but I live in the middle of nowhere, Alberta, so I think that's all right. But I also did it all for free, not asking for any in return. And that is definitely something that I struggled with in my history, is just, yes, I did a lot of work and I have a lot of hobby and stuff like that that I want to share with people. But was any of it good? Like, was it worth being paid for? Did I deserve to be, to have any income about it? And so an interesting story a couple weeks ago came up, and it was about, it's Will Wheaton's story. He wrote an article a couple years ago about, 7 ways he rebooted his life, and he was addressed by the Huffington Post. And the editor basically contacted him, and this is kind of the beginning of that blog post. It says, Huffington Post has a lot of views, reaches a pretty big audience. So for him, it was significant for them to ask him in the first place. But essentially, here's how the conversation went. Basically, you have Will Wheaton here. He says, we'd like to publish a story you wrote, Huffington Post. He says, me, cool, what do you pay? Huffington Post, oh, we can't afford pay, but exposure. Me, how about no? And that's essentially how the conversation went. Now, Will Wheaton's not, an everyday person. He has a lot of, I guess you could say, prominence in a particular niche audience sphere of people. But, the average person, if Huffington Post came to you, like if David, again, if Huffington Post came to you and said, yeah, we want to, put your article on our website just for exposure, would you say no?
I wouldn't really care, to be honest.
Would you say yes or say no?
Well, no, I wouldn't. Well, yes, you can.
Yeah, there we go. It's not as easy as it sounds. And basically says, I don't know what the going rate for something like this is. 6 cents a word is the SFWA's lowest professional rate for short fiction. That's just kind of rough estimate. So I thought, okay, let's find some more information about it, because everybody loves money. Let's figure it out. So I found on this particular website, which I have all the links for at the end, actually. For this particular one was a blog site, and one of the writers had just kind of gathered a bunch of the various amounts that people could be paid for. Some key ones there: content writing, $25 to $125 per hour, or 6 cents per every 16th per word. But to kind of give you more of a general idea, if I just pass this off here, is we have from salary.com, we have kind of 4 general groups of salaries. So the average person, this is all determined by your education, so having a bachelor's degree and years of experience basically. So if you have 0 to 2 years of experience, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8 basically. And they kind of average out around between $50,000 and $60,000. Now, does anyone know the lowest, what's it called, the minimum wage that a person needs to earn in order to live in Canada? Does anyone know that off the top of their head? John?
I think it was somewhere around 11.20 or 10.
It's like 20,000 or like 35. It was really low, right? So kind of gives you an idea that with a little bit of education, stuff like that, it can definitely change. So going into the next one now, a lot of people I know here, they enjoy Vice. So I thought, oh, this is an interesting story to bring up. So apparently working at Vice Media is not as cool as it seems. There was a website called Gawker who had a bunch of anonymous people post about their working conditions at Vice. And while a lot of people enjoyed working at Vice, they felt that they weren't being paid the wages that they deserved for the education that they had. The average person would be about $27,000, like $27,000 a year, and that's not really the norm. Rarely anyone, of course, would make over $45,000. And a large part of that is, even though Vice, the content of Vice is fantastic, it's like phenomenal, the problem is they have a bit of a playboy business owner that owns the company, and he takes a lot of the revenue away from the writers and staff. One of the key things that people wanted to point out is that if you were really one of the lucky few people, you could win a Vice ring if you had put in enough hours and hard work, which really is, a ring is nice, but it's hard to feed your family off a ring, right? So basically, Vice responded to this Gawker article, which actually Gawker put an update at the bottom of their article showing Vice's response, and I think the title is self-explanatory. I don't really have to say it, but I was really surprised that Vice actually went and did this in response to, as they would say, a clickbait journalism article. So that is really interesting. Again, I have all the links for this at the end of the presentation if you're interested in reading the whole story. So, going into that, I have 7 tips for freelancers. These are ways that you can protect yourself as an artist, as a writer, how you can actually, like if you're worried about someone taking advantage of you in your work, these tips are very good for essentially helping you protect yourself. So first we have research your future clients. So if you're going to work for a company, let's say CBC, CNN, and all these other companies, maybe do a little bit of research. Where are they good? Where are they bad in terms of providing for their employees? Do they actually have a fair rate, or do they like to go lowest common denominator like Huffington Post, which doesn't pay its contributors, or stuff like that? Then, of course, most important thing, have a written or digital document, a contract that lays out, what are your, where's the down payment, all the information about where legally you can have yourself protected, because if you just have a verbal agreement or over emails, it gets really wishy-washy, and if a court case ever came up, you would be, it would be very difficult to prove that, that any of these companies agreed to hire you in the first place. They might just treat you as a contributor, but not a freelance journalist. Leave a paper trail again if you have documents and information with your work history with a company. Make sure to actually have a file and a folder that actually contains all of your information. Make sure it's easy to access if some situations ever occur. Again, trust your instincts. If a company seems really shady, don't necessarily give them free work. If they're coming to you to ask, like going back to Will Wheaton's thing, they asked him if they were interested in his work. This is an article that he wrote 2 years prior. And for him, if someone is going to ask you, hey, can we publish your story on our website, it's probably worth something if they're going out of their way to ask you. And of course, make it easy for your clients to pay you. This is pretty self-explanatory. Things like PayPal, etc. are really good for just making it really easy to make transactions, to make sure you get paid on time. It's really important. And of course, be professional. If a company treats you badly, don't go on Twitter and say, I hate this company, blah, 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 blah. What you want to do is be professional and move on. So there we go. That is my speech. Thank you very much.
All right, you guys, let's focus for Kendall. Thanks. Alright, so recently Marshawn Lynch is running back for the Seattle Seahawks. He came out with, he teamed up with Starbucks to make a Beast Mode Frappuccino thing. And Beast Mode is like that's his thing, that's his gimmick kind of that everyone associates Marshawn Lynch with. And he's kind of getting criticized over it because people are saying you're focusing too much on your brand and not your game. And especially since this year he's kind of had some injuries and it's slowed him down a bit to the point where people are saying maybe you're not focusing on recovering enough and stuff like that. And you know, he's getting paid $31 million over the next 3 years. So they're saying, why are we paying you this much money if you're just going to focus on your brand? So why not let these guys pay you instead of us paying you this much money? And also he had like a bit of a holdout where he wouldn't go to training camp until they gave him his contract before. So they're saying maybe we shouldn't pay this guy this much money. And it's not just a recent thing that's come up, it's happened to other guys in the past. Last year, Damian Lillard signed a 5-year, $125 million contract. So, like, where else do you get paid $125 million to play basketball, just to play a game? But he's getting criticized over his rapping career that he started on his own. Started off, he released this thing on Instagram video, rapping, and people enjoyed it, so he started doing it more, and he started a thing called 4-Bar Friday, where people send in their rap videos to him, and he picks a winner and posts it. And then it started off, another thing started off, he had a freestyle he did on a radio show a while back, and that's where it kind of took off. But then people started to say, when he has a bad game, maybe you're focusing too much on that instead of being in the gym. Because he has released a few professionally recorded songs in a professional recording studio. So they're saying maybe you're focusing too much on that and not your game. And then they say, well, maybe we shouldn't pay you $125 million to go rap. And then another guy, a little bit more serious, but RG3, Robert Griffin III. He was the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft, and they traded everything to get this guy, their whole future. They gave it all up to get him. And he had the one good year, got hurt, and they said maybe he focused too much on his own brand and not put much effort into getting back in the gym and recovering. And like, after that, he has never been the same. He is now the 3rd string quarterback, so there's 2 other guys ahead of him on the depth chart. So he went from number 1 guy, 3rd guy on the team, barely making the team. And they're paying him lots of money to be there too. And farther back, it's happened too, but these guys haven't been as criticized about it. Like Shaquille O'Neal, he's just a lovable guy, so nobody likes harassing him about it. Shaquille O'Neal released 4 rap albums throughout his NBA career. Nobody bothered it. He also released a video game called Shaq Fu. It's kind of stupid, but
A little bit.
yeah.
It was a good game.
It was,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Shaq Fu, that was cool. And he was also in 2 movies, I don't know if you remember them, Blue Chips and Kazam. He was the genie in that one.
I know that one.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. I enjoyed it, like, I was a little kid, Shaq's awesome, but he never quite had the drop-off like some of the other guys did, but he never really received the criticism. And Kobe Bryant had just an awful rap album that should not have been made. They should have taken away his contract for that. It was called Visions. It never actually released. He had 1 song that released off of it. It was so terrible, Sony just dropped him and never decided to put this album out because it was that bad. But they never got the criticism for that these other guys have, because they backed it up. So that kind of brings up the question, what are we paying these athletes to do? Is it to win games and be the best teammate they can be, or is it to be a star and fill the seats? So when you think about it, the whole reason we have these sports is to make money. It's a business. So if these guys are out there promoting themselves, in my opinion, they should be able to promote themselves as a brand and get people wanting to see them and filling seats, making money, buying jerseys, selling merchandise. So, and it also takes away the freedom of how much are they of their personal life are they forced to give up into training. Like, they're expected to go to practice, play games, train the rest of the time. And that's honestly not fair for anyone to do that. You should have your own personal time to spend on hobbies and stuff like what Adam does. He has his hobbies. All of you like YouTube, gaming stuff. These guys just happen to have their hobbies and resources to access that. So that just brings up, this whole thing just brought up the question of how much effort should they be putting into training and making themselves a better teammate and player. And yeah, that's my speech.